Okay, so quick update. I was holding off for a little bit because I contacted the publisher, Skyhorse Publishing, just to make sure the copyright um, notice is only for printed material, reproduced full scale. So I wanted to make sure that it was okay to do it, a video of it. So I'm still waiting to hear back from them. But I figured I'd get started and go through the introduction, the foreword about the author, and the acknowledgments. It's pretty innocuous. It's only a few pages. If it turns out to be a big deal with them, I will take the video down. Also, as kind of a contingency plan, there's an uncopyrighted version of this that was, what was it, 1970 something. If I'm not able to do a video on this, I'll get a hold of that uncopyrighted version of it and go through that instead. So, and I have a mic today, so I'm stepping up my game. Anyway, okay, so let's start. This is the introduction by Don Mann. So I hope this turns out all right so y'all can read along. But anyway, okay, so as the Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical NBC Program Manager for SEAL Team 6 during the 1990s, among my responsibilities was to provide plans, training programs, and equipment for use in preparing for and defending our team against nuclear attacks. Even though it seemed the worst was behind us with the end of the Cold War, I don't believe we, the government, the U.S. government, or the rest of the U.S. military made this kind of work a big enough priority. Now more than ever, the likelihood of a nuclear attack is very great. Keep in mind this was written in 87, but like I mentioned in the first video, it's pretty relevant today, I think. So anyway, in just the past few years, we've seen the rise of a host of rogue nations and enemies that actively seek out means to use nuclear weapons to terrorize. North Korea, case in point, has nuclear warheads, having recently tested missiles off its eastern coast, and Iran is building a nuclear facility. Despite sanctions imposed on them by the U.S., these nations continue to develop their nuclear technology. The actions of these two countries have created an environment of fear worldwide. As Americans, we are very vulnerable to a nuclear attack. Although most of the world is focused on and very concerned with Iran's and North Korea's nuclear intentions, there are also more than 17,000 nuclear warheads already in existence that need to be given much greater attention and can pose our most serious nuclear threat today. Sorry, my hair is getting in the way. The likelihood of eliminating the threat of a nuclear attack or even an accidental launch in today's world is highly unlikely. We only have one choice, and that is to prepare for the worst case scenario. After touring many nuclear fallout shelters throughout Europe, I realized how much better prepared most of these countries are for a nuclear war compared to the United States. As kind of a side note, I got a hold of the emergency management director, I guess, here in Arizona, asking about like fallout shelters, if there were any in the area. And he basically told me that everything that he was aware of was decommissioned years ago. So yeah, it goes into this a little bit further in this book about other countries, Russia and Switzerland, and some others. But yeah, as far as fallout shelters in the U.S., they apparently don't exist. I guess for the general population, they don't. I don't know. Sure, really rich people have them, but not the rest of us. So we're kind of on our own when it comes to this, which is a little disconcerting for sure. But anyway, okay, so I'll keep going here. They have numerous fallout shelters, all of which are strategically placed. Some of the shelters are carved into mountainsides and have dual purposes, doubling as hydroelectric facilities, daycare centers, ice skating rinks, or libraries. When the nuclear warning alarms and sirens sound, large portions of the population know exactly to which shelter they need to report. Once they arrive at their respective shelters, they have access to medical supplies, food, water, blankets, and cots. They can survive for relatively long periods of time, protected from an attack. In the U.S., other than perhaps some of the preppers, we are not trained, equipped, or prepared for a nuclear attack. It is not a priority in the U.S. to provide training, equipment, or protection in the event of a nuclear attack. The U.S. government simply does not have in its arsenal an effective nuclear defense capability. Therefore, it becomes a personal responsibility that we educate and prepare ourselves, our families, and our coworkers against this threat. Cresson Kearny's Nuclear War Survival Skills, the first book of its kind, is a comprehensive survival manual dealing with the critical issues related to surviving a nuclear attack. Kearny's sole purpose for writing this book was to protect Americans who want to improve their chances of surviving a nuclear attack. Kearny writes that the best hope for surviving a nuclear war is self-help civil defense, knowing the basic facts about nuclear weapon effects and what you, your family, and small groups can do to protect yourselves. Nuclear war survival skills covers not only basic survival skills, but also the survival mindset one must have in order to survive a nuclear attack. It provides a comprehensive explanation on the many grave dangers of nuclear war and how to manage the fear, terror, and other psychological aspects associated with a nuclear attack. This book describes in great detail protective measures recommended against the use of chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. It contains recommendations on stockpiling low-cost survival foods. It means to store food and water. It provides instructions on what type of foods are safe to eat, and how to disinfect water from deadly waterborne diseases, as well as how to cook with limited supplies. Kearny provides a thorough list of very specific clothing, tools, supplies, and protective items that could be very useful in the event of an attack. He covers preventative medical practices, wound care, radiation sickness, and treatment. The book also outlines detailed yet easy to understand instructions on buildings and seeking expedient fallout shelters with ventilation, cooling, and lighting. Nuclear War Survival Skills is an all-encompassing manual. It delivers a straightforward approach to educating us about vital nuclear survival practices. The book will save lives. It belongs in every home. Another side note, I am getting in order some stuff to kind of do like a DIY 30-day like survival bucket. I got some whole kernel white wheat. I'm trying to track down a hand crank grain mill. And then it goes over that in the later chapters of the book, but it's basically like vegetable oil, sugar, salt, iodized, wheat, beans, multivitamins, et cetera, et cetera. Also, I'm going to try and do an extemporaneous preparation of potassium iodide, the SSKI, the saturated solution of potassium iodide. Busted out my old textbooks. I was trying to track down a recipe for it. I couldn't find anything yet, but I'm going to try and get in touch with the chemistry department that I ordered some of the stuff from. So I know there's a real easy one with the iostat tablets where you just basically crush it up and mix it with like 20 mils of water or simple syrup and stuff like that. But I'll go over that in a little more detail when we come to that chapter. So, okay. The foreword. There are two diametrically opposite views on civil defense. Russian official policy holds that civil defense is feasible even in a nuclear war. American official policy, or at any rate the implementation of that policy, is based on the assumption that civil defense is useless. The Russians, having learned a bitter lesson in the Second World War, have bent every effort to defend their people under all circumstances. They are spending several $1 billion per year on this activity. They have effective plans to evacuate their cities before they let loose a nuclear strike. They have strong shelters for the people who must remain in the cities. They are building up protected food reserves to tide them over a critical period. All this may mean that in a nuclear exchange, which we must try to avoid and to deter, the Russian deaths would probably not exceed 10 million. Tragic as such a figure is, the Russian nation would survive. If they succeed in eliminating the United States, they can commandeer food, machinery, and manpower from the rest of the world. They could recover rapidly. They would have attained their goal, world domination. In the American view, the Russian plan is unfeasible. Those who argue on this side point out the great power of the nuclear weapons. In this, they are right. Their argument is particularly impressive in its psychological effect. But this argument has never been backed up by careful quantitative analysis, which takes into account the planned dispersal and sheltering of the Russian population and the other measures which the Russians have taken and those to which they are committed. That evacuation of our own citizens can be extremely useful if we see that the Russians are evacuating is simple common sense. With the use of American automobiles, an evacuation could be faster and more effective than is possible in Russia. To carry it out, we need not resort to the totalitarian methods of the Iron Curtain countries. It will suffice to warn our people and advise them where to go, how to protect themselves. The Federal Emergency Management Administration, FEMA, contains the beginnings on which such a policy might be built. The present book does not, and indeed cannot, make the assumption that such minimal yet extremely useful government guidance will be available. Instead, it outlines the skills that individuals or groups of individuals can learn and apply in order to improve their chances of survival. The emergency management guy that I talked to also mentioned ready.gov. I went on to some local FEMA websites, and it's basically like a blog and news. It was pretty... it was not helpful at all. It was kind of a joke, actually. But anyway, he did refer me to ready.gov. There's a ton of YouTube videos, too, on preppers and stuff that... it's probably a better resource in my opinion, but this book is a really good one also. That's why I'm covering it. So, okay, onward. This book is not a description of civil defense. It is a guide to stopgap civil defense, which individuals could carry out for themselves, if need be, with no expenditures by our government. It fills the gap between the ineffective civil defense that we have today and the highly effective survival preparations that we could and should have a few years from now. However, if we go no further than what we can do on the basis of this book, then the United States cannot survive a major nuclear war. Yet this book, besides being realistic and objectively correct, serves two extremely important purposes. One is it will help to save lives. The second purpose is to show that with relatively inexpensive governmental guidance and supplies, an educated American public could indeed defend itself. We could survive a nuclear war and remain a nation. This is an all-important goal. Its most practical aspect lies in the fact that men in the Kremlin are cautious. If they cannot count on destroying us, they probably will never launch their nuclear arsenal against us. Civil defense is at once the most peaceful and the most effective deterrent of nuclear war. Some may argue that the Russians could evacuate again and again, and thus, by forcing us into similar moves, exhaust us. I believe that in reality, they would anger us sufficiently so that we would rearm in earnest. That is not what the Russians want to accomplish. Others may say that the Russians could strike without previous evacuation. This could result in heavy losses on their part, which I hope they will not risk. Civil defense, as here described, will not eliminate the danger of nuclear war. It will considerably diminish its probability. This book takes a long overdue step in educating the American people. It does not suggest that survival is easy. It does not prove the national survival is possible, but it can save lives, and it will stimulate thought and action, which will be crucial in our two main purposes, to preserve freedom and to avoid war. Edward Teller. Okay, and then about the author, that'll be the end of it. Wow, this is going to take me a long time. I didn't realize. It's okay, though. This is my civil service, public service announcement, so I'm going to do it regardless. Probably even, well, I shouldn't say that. Anyway, okay, about the author, Cresson, Kearny. Actually, this is written by Eugene P. Vigner. physicist, Nobel laureate, and the only surviving initiator of the nuclear age, May 1979. Okay, when the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission authorized me in 1964 to initiate the Civil Defense Project at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, one of the first researchers I recruited was Cresson H. Kearny. Most of his life has been preparation, unplanned, and planned for writing this guide to help people unfamiliar with the effects of nuclear weapons improve their chances of surviving a nuclear attack. During the past 15 years, he has done an unequaled amount of practical field work on basic survival problems without always conforming to the changing civil defense doctrine. After I returned to my professional duties at Princeton in 1966, the civil defense effort at Oak Ridge National Laboratory was first headed by James C. Brissie and is now headed by Conrad V. Chester, both have wholeheartedly supported Kearny's down-to-earth research. And Chester was not only a co-developer of several of the survival items described in this book, but also participated in the planning of the experiments testing them. Kearny's concern with nuclear war dangers began while he was studying for his degree in civil engineering at Princeton. He graduated summa cum laude in 1937. His Princeton studies had already acquainted him with the magnitude of an explosion in which nuclear energy is liberated, then only a theoretical possibility. After winning a Rhodes Scholarship, Kearny earned 2 degrees in geology at Oxford. Still before the outbreak of World War II, he observed the effective preparations made in England to reduce the effects of aerial attacks. He had a deep aversion to dictatorships, don't we all, whether from the right or the left. And during the Munich crisis, he acted as a courier for an underground group helping anti-Nazis escape from Czechoslovakia. Following graduation from Oxford, Kearny did geological exploration work in the Andes of Peru and in the jungles of Venezuela. He has traveled also in Mexico, China, and the Philippines. A year before Pearl Harbor, realizing the United States would soon be at war, that our jungle troops should have at least as good personal equipment, food, and individual medical supplies as do exploration geologists, he quit his job with Standard Oil Company of Venezuela, returned to the United States, and went on active duty as an infantryman reserve lieutenant. Kearny was soon assigned to Panama as the jungle experiment officer of the Panama Mobile Force. In that capacity, he was able to improve or invent and then thoroughly jungle test much of the specialized equipment and rations used by our jungle infantrymen in World War II. For this work, he was promoted to major and awarded the Legion of Merit. To take his chances in combat, in 1944, the author volunteered for duty with the Office of Strategic Services as a demolition specialist helping to limit the Japanese invasion. Then driving into the wintry mountains of southern China, he saw mass starvation and death firsthand. The experiences gained in this capacity also resulted in an increased understanding of both the physical and emotional problems of people whose country is under attack. Worry about the increasing dangers of nuclear war and America's lack of civil defense caused the author in 1961 to consult Herman Kahn, a leading nuclear strategist. Kahn, who was at that time forming a non-profit war research organization, the Hudson Institute, offered him work as a research analyst. 2 years of civil defense research in the think tank made the offer much more knowledgeable of survival problems. In 1964, he joined the Oak Ridge Civil Defense Project, and since then, Oak Ridge has been Kearny's base of operations. Except for 2 years during the height of the Vietnam War, for this Vietnam work on combat equipment, and also for his contributions to preparations for improving survivability in the event of nuclear war. He received the Army's Decoration for Distinguished Civilian Services in 1972. This book draws extensively on Kearny's understanding of the problem of civil defense acquired as a result of his own field testing of shelters and other survival needs, and also from an intensive study of the serious civil defense preparations undertaken by other countries, including Switzerland, Sweden, the USSR, and China. He initiated and edited the Oak Ridge National Laboratory translations of Soviet civil defense handbooks and of a Chinese manual, and gained additional knowledge from these new sources. Trips to England, Europe, and Israel also expanded his information on survival measures, which contributed to the nuclear war survival skills. However, the book advocates principally that do-it-yourself instructions that field tests have proved to be practical. Okay, so that's it. And the acknowledgments. I won't go through those, but I'll show them here. There's 1, 2, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. So about 20 people that contributed to this book. So okay, so yeah, 20 minutes. Wow, yeah, this is gonna take a long time, but I hope it's helpful. I hope that Skyhorse allows me to do it, even though it's gonna take me. We'll probably have. I shouldn't say that. Anyway, so okay. Well, I hope it's helpful, and if I get the go ahead from them, I will go ahead and do the introduction next. And if I don't, it might take a little while. If they don't allow me to get a hold of the uncopyrighted version of it, but hopefully they get back to me. I emailed them 2 days ago, and yeah, so hopefully they get back to me and give me the go ahead. So okay, well, thanks for watching.